So this summer, Manchester United made a big move by signing Bryan Mbeumo, and it was one of those signings which got the fans incredibly excited because we pretty much knew that he was going to succeed. He's just one of those players that is so good, it almost feels impossible for him to fail, as long as he could get the right connection with Amad on the right-hand side. This weekend against Sunderland, we started to see that. So the first thing that I think is worth discussing is the fact that the whole situation, the whole picture changes the second that Amad and Mbeumo play together. The synergy may not be completely natural between them, but one thing that is natural is that they both possess the ability to play out wide, and they are both massive threats in the final third. And that immediately this weekend saw a change to our tactical approach. So what we have seen in recent weeks is Amad either not in the starting 11 or actually in the left 10 due to injuries to other players. That has often meant that someone like Mazraoui or Diogo Dalot has played on the right hand side. And that's had a real effect on the way that Bryan Mbeumo has been playing. I mentioned it in a live stream recently that what we've started to see is the wing back on the right hand side starting to drift into midfield and Mbeumo actually starting to take up a wider position. If you look at the average positions from the game against Chelsea, thanks to xgstat.com, you can see Mbeumo playing in a wider position. Again, from XG Stat, we can see the same for Mbeumo against Brentford. He's playing that little bit wider. However, against Sunderland, with Amad back in the team, Mbeumo immediately comes back inside. And the reason for that is because when you get Amad in your team and you ask him to play wide on the right-hand side, he's comfortable doing it. When we play Dalot there, we feel that Mbeumo needs to go over there and help, that Mbeumo needs to pick up the ball to provide us with some dribbling threat or some wide threat or some creativity. Mbeumo is needed in that position to help us out. When you put Amad there, who can sort of do things himself, it changes the picture because Amad can look after the ball, Amad can dribble with the ball, Amad can progress by himself, which means Mbeumo doesn't need to come over, which means we start to see the tactical ideas that Mbeumo was actually signed for in the first place. Now, the thing that actually really impressed me at the weekend was the ability of these two to relieve pressure for United, to look after the ball in deep positions, to make sure that we didn't lose possession, but also the ability to quite easily, quite comfortably gain territory. Now, I should add that part of that is because Sunderland set up poorly during the early parts of the game. They struggled to get to grips with the United structure, but these two deserve credit regardless for the work that they did. And I think what was important was that they had this understanding of not wanting to block each other. So let's say, for example, Casemiro has the ball here, and Mbeumo, rather than dropping wide and bringing a defender with him, was actually moving inside, almost getting out of the way a little bit, so that Amad could now have the ball with time and space to work with. In other moments, we're going to see Amad shapes wider to pull a defender out, and then Mbeumo can receive the ball in the centre. And I do feel that this is partly what Mbeumo was signed for. His extra physicality, his technical quality, his ability to look after the ball. We saw last season we couldn't do that a lot of the time in these positions, but Mbeumo is the sort of player that can. And I think we started to see that at the weekend. The other thing on top of that is the fact that they are both wingers. There's not many football teams in the world that play with two wingers on one side of the pitch, which is why there are some problems as well, right? Why they will occasionally clash over the course of the season, because naturally they sort of want to play in the same zone. But the big positive spin on this is no one else has this. So if you can be the team to make two wingers work on the same side of the pitch, then it's going to give you a really unique tactical weapon. And I just felt that we started to see that this weekend. Now, we're going to see some of those qualities in the next few clips here. Now, I wish I could show you video footage, but I can't due to copyright reasons today. But what I can show you is some still shots of sort of what was going on, and hopefully you guys can get the picture. So we can see Mbeumo and Amad both wide on the right-hand side, and we can see Mbeumo dropping towards the ball. Mbeumo and Amad close to each other. The Sunderland defenders, and this is what we're talking about with the structural issue that they had, they struggled to press United, but also you got the sense that the Sunderland players didn't want to go tight, even if they could have done, particularly those two defenders on the back line. It sort of felt that they didn't want to go in close with these guys, because if they did, they felt that they were in trouble. And we actually saw that in the next clip. So as Yoro plays the ball into Bryan Mbeumo, you can see Amad wider on this occasion and Mbeumo really central. As this ball goes into Mbeumo's feet, because Mbeumo is a winger rather than a midfielder, the way he wants to play is different. His instinct is a little bit more aggressive. A midfielder here might take a sort of sideways touch and perhaps move the ball backwards, or roll a sort of almost like a deep, safe pass out to Amad in this position here. But Mbeumo is very different. Yes, the first touch to look after the ball, but after that, he really wants to spin and actually commit this defender and be aggressive. And that means that Amad, rather than receiving the ball over here, like we discussed, can actually receive the ball up here instead. And that's Mbeumo's quality bringing that. I do apologise, I just had to pause for a moment. You may have heard my doggo come in, but he's all good now. Anyway, Bruno Fernandes picks the ball up in midfield, sprays the ball wide to Amad, and Mbeumo is in a much more central position. But this is where the natural dynamic of the two starts to come into play. Amad, being left-footed, playing on the right-hand side, wants to spin in the pitch with that first touch because he wants to come onto his left, and that allows the ball to come into Bryan and Mbeumo. For a moment, they feel like they're in each other's way a little bit, and you start to think, is this a sticking point with the system, with the idea, potentially? But to be fair, on this occasion, they sort of sort it out between themselves, and Mbeumo drifts wide with the ball, Amad comes inside, and this is the great thing about them. With other wingers, it may not work. With these two, there's potential that it could, because they're both two-way threats. They can both go inside, they can both go outside, and again, that's what we saw here, and Mbeumo spins into the wider zone. Now, importantly, with these guys being attackers, we also saw them working together in the attack. So not just progressing the ball from deep, although they did do that well, but also starting to work together a little bit better in the final third. If you cast your mind back to the opening weeks of the season, we saw moments where Mbeumo's trying to shape the ball onto his left foot, and Amad's almost making the same run because he wants to do the same, and they're sort of blocking each other. What we saw at the weekend was the two of them understanding each other a little bit better. And this is why we always have to be patient, because these things do take time. This is two humans trying to figure out how each other mentally, but also physically are trying to work things out. And it's why it's not perfect yet, and it will take a while before it is anything close to perfect. But right now, what we're seeing is how it could work. And I think that's promising. We saw that at the weekend. And I think for me, the solution is for neither of them to be fixed. I think if you just play Mbeumo as an inside 10, I think at times he's going to struggle because he isn't sort of a diminutive maestro in these positions, right? And I think the same for Amad. If you left him stuck out wide, I don't think he'd enjoy it. I think he wants to get closer to goal. If we flip it, if Mbeumo was stuck out wide, I don't think he would have a nice time because he wants to score goals. And if Amad was always inside, then I don't think he'd get enough space. So the way for both of them to work together is actually to move and interchange with each other. Now, if you guys were paying close attention to the match on Saturday, you would have seen all of this sort of tied in together for Manchester United's first goal, which I believe is the most passes for a goal in the Premier League this season. Bryan Mbeumo starts on the right-hand side, shows the physicality that we all know and love to protect the ball. Works the ball back to Amad. Amad plays a simple inside pass. Being left-footed does actually help him here, though. Anyway, a few seconds pass. Amad and Mbeumo on the right-hand side. Initially, Mbeumo is sort of in the way, blocking the wide pass. This defender, if we just mark him here, this defender could get out to Amad if the ball goes wide. So you can see Mbeumo starts to move inside the pitch, which means by the time the pass does go wide, Mbeumo has actually distracted that defender. He's taken that defender with him, and Amad can receive with more time. We see a similar position a few passes later. Leny Yoro into the feet of Casemiro. Casemiro round the corner to Amad. This is where Casemiro is quite useful, and you can see Mbeumo in that more tucked in position. But now these guys are going to start working together. Mbeumo, despite being the inside right 10, spins into the wide channel. He spins towards the touchline. The reason he does that is because it creates space for Amad. Amad can come inside onto his stronger left foot. That is his habit. That's his instinct. That's what he wants to do. Come inside onto his left. Now, eventually what he does is he sort of chops, turns, changes direction, and moves the ball wide to the right, where Bryan Mbeumo is now on the ball. But Amad doesn't stop there. We saw this at the weekend. Amad bursts through. He bursts through. And what this does is creates that room for Mbeumo. Mbeumo comes inside, and then he's got that delivery. But if we just go back through some of these clips, you can see the different positions they're picking up. So it ends up with Mbeumo as the most central. But just 2 passes earlier, Mbeumo was the widest player on the pitch. If we go a little bit earlier, Mbeumo was slightly tucked in, allowing the room for Amad. These two were constantly changing in these different zones, and that's what we need to see. Now, something that I really need to clarify is that this is still far from perfect. This is all about this potentially working, showing glimpses of how it will work in the future, promising signs. Of course, there are still problems. Neither of them are defensive experts, which is a bit of a problem down the right-hand side. It does leave Yoro and Casemiro with a lot of work to do, and it's difficult to do that sort of volume of work. So we need to be careful when we use this. We also know that in moments, if we go back to habits, which we see a lot from players, they are going to want to play in the same way. At times, they will both want to come inside onto their left foot, or at times they'll both want to spin out wide. This is going to take time. This is a process, the two of them, like I said, understanding each other, working with each other. But what we've seen today is that the potential is there. That if they can make it work, it can become incredibly unpredictable for the opposition to try and deal with this. What United need to do is make sure, and this is an Amorim job, I think, as well, coaching, getting the message across to the players, providing the system and the idea for the players to work within it, is we need to figure out that balance of who goes where and when. In what moments do we want Mbeumo more central? Perhaps it's when we're trying to protect the ball from a long ball. But perhaps when it comes to crossing, that's when we then want Mbeumo a little bit wider. In counter-attacks, perhaps you want him back central with Amad carrying the ball. These are all things that we need to consider. When do they chop and change? That's something we've got to work on. Now, as I was saying there, this is of course far from the finished article, a bit like Manchester United in general, but what we have seen here is a glimpse of something that can work. Potential that these two right wingers on the right-hand side can work together and cause serious chaos. And like I said, if we can get it right, it's unique. No one else does this as far as I'm aware. I can't think of a different team playing two right wingers on the right-hand side of the pitch, both of which are left-footed and want to play in a similar way. I can't really think of too many teams that do that. There's a reason for that, because sometimes it causes players to block each other. But like I said, if we can get this to work, it's unique. It's a weapon that we possess that no one else would. So I think it's worth sticking with and continuing to experiment with it. Perhaps you don't use it in every game. Liverpool, after the international break, might be a tricky one to try and implement this due to the defensive side of the game. But I think it's worth sticking with this and keep working with this. Sometimes Mbeumo could even play wing back and we can bring in a different right 10. These two haven't got to start every game together. But over the course of the season, I think it's important that we give this an opportunity to work. Give the players time to figure it out. Because if we do, it could be special. But for now, it really is a waiting game, sort of enjoying the glimpses and thinking about how it's going to work in the future. But that is very much a future thing. So for right here, right now, there is nothing left to talk about. So thank you guys very much for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like, subscribe, and get your notifications on. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.